We are back with another live episode of Bully Ball on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. I'm Jason Aponte, joined as always by Steph Sanchez. Steph, good to have you back.
Good to be back. And I like the new logo up there. It's seen some new things in the decor here. Yeah, I know Rob held it down for me last week, and hope he didn't give you too much trouble.
No, everything was fine actually. I'm not gonna go the Steph Sanchez route and just go crazy and talk crazy about Rob. I thought he did great. I thought it was great. Still
Awesome.
missed you the past week, but before we get into obviously all the speculation about the draft, Brandon Aiyuk, what John Lynch said and didn't say, I want to toss something out at you that is baseball related, but it has to do with Seinfeld. So yesterday, Aaron Boone was thrown out of a game without saying a word because a fan behind him was heckling the umpire, and he believed it to be the Yankee manager while sending him off. Where am I going with this? Idea for a Seinfeld episode. George Costanza is the fan behind the manager. He's the one who's yelling, and they find out that he's the one who gets the Yankee manager thrown out. Rate that episode on a scale of 1 to 10.
I'd give that a 9. And
I
I,
love it.
I I would actually say, should it be Elaine though? Because Elaine did come through in that one game wearing
The
a
Orioles hat.
Baltimore's hat. She
Mhm.
ain't with the Yankees like that. So she's known to stir up some trouble in these games.
The only reason I would say George is because George is a Yankee fan and he'd be yelling at the umpire in the Yankees' defense. Elaine wouldn't be doing that, and that wouldn't get the Yankee
Sure.
guy out. And honestly, that just seems like something that is so Costanza, like him getting the Yankee manager thrown out of the game, and then he'd have to deal with the consequences of it the entire episode. I love this. I literally bring the band back together just for this episode idea.
There's so many ideas that like come up in my head that I'm like, "Ugh, they need to just do like a current day season, and I think I'd have a lot of fun watching that.
100%. Just do one or two. Not don't bring it all the way back because I think no reboot is going to be perfect. And I'm very sick of people bringing back shows that like or movies that are just done. Like it feels like all the movies are just rehashes of older movies and shows are reboots. We don't need all those things. We need new ideas. But in this case, this is definitely going back to the well for the right idea. All right. Enough that we wanted to make sure that we got people in here. Guys, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Ghost Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your audio podcast. Let's get into it. John Lynch spoke yesterday. John Lynch is the master of the DC dip and twirl, saying nothing, saying something, and 49er fans reading in between the lines, between body language and words that are there, words that aren't there. Your reaction to John Lynch's press conference yesterday? Go.
He took the Debo Samuel negotiation season route in, kind of at the very top of the presser, just kind of given his 2 cents on the Brandon Aiyuk situation as it stands today, which was pretty much a reiteration of what he had been saying all along. Like, we want to keep Brandon Aiyuk. Things are going well. We're talking through all this stuff. That's it. Now ask me questions. But kind of keeping it as, don't ask me about stuff that I'm not going to tell you, kind of thing, about stuff on their campsite. I don't want to air out any dirty laundry in regards to this negotiation. I think it's smart, but people are going to ask questions anyway, and they did. And there were some he was willing to answer, and as we saw, there were some he was not willing to answer. And I don't know, we'll probably get to that here in a second, but I don't think I really learned anything new, quite frankly, from the presser, which, I think we could have all pretty much expected before going into it.
That's the funny thing. And I love the passion of this fan base, but the idea of trying to find something in a press conference where nothing was said and nothing was expected to be said is insane. Did you hear how he answered this question? Well, he didn't say this and he could have said that. You learned nothing. What I learned is Brandon Ayuk might be a 49er. Brandon Ayuk might not be a 49er. And the 49ers are going to draft players.
Mm.
That's what I learned. There's never anything there. There's never anything there. It's never, well, he said it in this manner. Guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? John Lynch is the master. He is the reason that they sent him up there. He is the reason that there's nothing to be said because he's media trained. He never said anything that lets you know that Brandon Aiyuk is going. He never said anything to let you know that Brandon Aiyuk is staying. We hope to have him in our plans. Fact. Teams have called. Fact. All of these things, and none of them meant anything. None of it means nothing. It literally means nothing. It's insane to see the picking apart of things that were said, things that weren't said, and ultimately, it boils down to the same two options that were going to happen before John Lynch spoke. Either Brandon Aiyuk is going to be traded or Brandon Aiyuk is going to be extended. I learned nothing. There was nothing to learn. The only thing I learned is that they have 22 first round grades
Yeah.
and how many draftable players. I thought that was cool. I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of other organizations aren't forthcoming with their grades and how many or how many draftable players they have. I think that's something that a lot of teams are keeping close to the vest. I think it was Jonathan Gannon from Arizona who said, "You must be crazy if you think I'm going to answer that." I'm like, "Oh well, big secret. You have the number 4 pick. I'm sure you're going to take Marvin Harrison. You're really like throwing caution to the wind with that one." But I I just don't get it. I really don't. I mean, anytime that this regime speaks, it's very basic. It's very media trained. It's very non-answers. I never watch a press conference and I'm like, "Did you catch that? Wow!" It's never anything. It's either Brandon Ayuk's going to be here or Brandon Ayuk is not. But we do have a portion of the video that I wanted to get to, and it felt like this is the only thing that I really could take away from it because I did watch a little bit of it before we got on. John Lynch felt like he was a little bit on edge at certain times when these questions were asked. That's one thing I'll say. And I think that is due to the attention because he did try to start this press conference saying, Brandon Ayuk, don't ask me about it. Like, we're trying to keep him. We're talking. That's it. And then, boom, the first 5 questions are about BA. And it felt like he was getting to a point where he was just like, all right, enough, right? Like, even somebody as calm and cool and collected as John Lynch can feel like he's on edge. And Rob has a video queued up. I think we should play it so we can react to it real quick.
Given permission to his side to go.
I'm not going to get in all those details. We're really focused on BA being part of us. He's under contract, and we're looking forward to that.
Now, that may seem like nothing, but that was Matt Mayoko asking a question, and John Lynch cut him off. He didn't even want to listen to the great Matt Mayoko finish his question. Steph Sanchez react to that.
He had to have known that question was coming. Now, he thought his little disclaimer at the start of the presser would maybe discourage someone from asking that, but as John Lynch, did acknowledge at the beginning, these guys have a job to do as well. So their job is to ask these questions. Of course, John Lynch doesn't have to answer all of them, and he kind of let them know from the beginning he might not answer all of them. So that was one he refused to answer. And not only that, but didn't even let Matt Mayoko finish his question. But again,
Whoa.
he knew what the question was right away because we've seen those reports, those rumors kind of flying about on the timeline and all that. So to me, I mean, does it mean there's smoke? It maybe, possibly. But also, I think, knowing that there's a nice mutual relationship between John Lynch and Brandon Ayuk's agent, I think wanting to keep certain things out of, these answers and keep everything somewhat clean, I think in these negotiations is important. I mean, even when things got pretty nasty, you could say in the Debo, situation, I think also, the 49ers try to take the high road and didn't really put too much out there, especially in the pre-draft presser, if we recall that as well. So I think the 49ers just want to keep it that way. But it could be that, yeah, there is some, maybe they have allowed Brandon Ayuk's side to look at trade options out there. Could be. He didn't
And
say
John Lynch
no.
said, yeah, John Lynch said no comment. No
Basically.
comment. No comment's a little bit more damning than like yes or no, in my opinion. That just literally, that's only going to add fuel to the fire. But I do want to say that even if that is the case, that's part of the process because it's the 49ers' job to figure out what they can get. Now, what you can get doesn't necessarily mean that is exactly your first option. You are trying to see if you can get a team to overstep, blow you away with something that's insane, right? Like a high first rounder, maybe another player. Like, you never know what you can get if you don't gauge the value. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the 49ers' first option is to move Brandon Ayuk. But if someone is silly enough to say, we're going to give you a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick and a player, and you can keep 31, who's to say no to that? Doesn't mean that someone's going to offer that, but if you don't gauge, you'll never know. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they are actively looking to get rid of him. Gauging value and actively looking to get rid of him would be them calling around, would be them asking teams. I don't think that's the same thing. And again, this press conference really is just shining a light on the entire process of extending a player. It's either going to be you get blown away by a trade or you extend the guy. That's it. And this is the way it goes. You unfollow the team. We have teams that call. We see what they're offering. It's not enough. We want to keep you. Bottom line, I do believe John Lynch when he says he wants to keep Brandon Aiyuk. Bottom line, I do. But you'd be silly and naive to not think that the 49ers aren't listening to someone asking about him to see what they can get. And honestly, it's more about this being the process. This is the process, and this is just how it plays out. Sometimes it plays out behind closed doors, and we don't know. This one is particularly playing out a little bit more publicly. And I think that's just where we are right now. Again, the biggest thing that I took away from John Lynch's press conference is either Brandon Ayuk is going to be traded or Brandon Ayuk is going to be extended. I'm still betting on an extension at this point. There's no third option here. There is no third option here at this point. So going into the draft, it wouldn't be a 49ers draft without some sort of controversy at all. Sticking with Brandon Ayuk, though, Steph. Mike Silver. And Mike Silver's having an offseason to remember in terms of hitting on nearly everything that he's been talking about. And he puts out an article today in which he states, don't be surprised if something happens with Brandon Ayuk on draft night. And even goes on to state a second or an early third could get it done. Steph, a second or an early third? That's not what I was looking for to trade. Not that it matters. I'm sure that's not what the 49ers are looking for in a trade, but a second or a third? Are you still there?
So yeah, sorry, my AirPods disconnected for some reason. Trying to get them back. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not really surprised again that, that this is possible. I mean, that's kind of again what we learned from the John Lynch presser as well. So not exactly a surprise. I still don't see it happening just because look, this is a wide receiver heavy class, and it's very top heavy for the wide receivers. So because of that, I think I'm just expecting that there's not going to be a team interested in making a deal that the 49ers would be willing to take. Now, the second round and maybe a third situation from how I read it, I feel like other execs believe that the 49ers would ultimately be willing to accept that. I don't know if that's true. I frankly, bleep it out, Rob, but I don't give a shit what other teams and other execs, think about what the 49ers might be willing to accept, because I know the 49ers overvalue their guys. So I think the 49ers, because they want to keep Brandon Aiyuk as well, they're going to stand pat on the value that they have designated for him. And I still think that's a first round pick because Mike Silver confirmed that as well, that to this point, that's what they've been looking for Brandon Aiyuk. And so again, that goes back to, for other teams, would that make sense? Not really, because there's a lot of really good startable right away wide receivers in this class that, hey, guess what? They're going to be on a rookie contract and you'd have their rights for 5 years. And that sounds a lot better than Brandon Aiyuk, a guy who's, a couple years older than some of these prospects. And also you're going to have to pay him at least $25 million. Also, that Mike Silver article did mention, at the very least, Brandon Aiyuk is looking for north of $25 million. That's not a surprise. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a very attractive option for the 49ers. Are teams interested in Brandon Aiyuk? Yes, but I don't think they're willing to pay him that plus give up a first round pick in exchange for him. So I think for that reason it's unlikely, but he did say anything's possible. So we're back to square one, Jay. It could happen. It
all
could
right.
not happen. Help
All
us
right,
out
look.
here.
I respect what Mike Silver does, man. And I think he's been dead on the offseason. But you see that last part, right? They want a first rounder, nobody's offering it. But anything's possible. Yes, anything's possible. Anything is possible. The language around these reports are maddening. It's nothing concrete, there's nothing solid, and you always end it with anything is possible to cover your ass. And this is not about Mike Silver. This is not about Mike Silver. I respect him a ton. This is about every single person that has something that they want to put out there as a report and then ends it with anything is possible. So if something different happens, you can say, well, I said anything is possible. I should start doing these reports. The 49ers are looking to trade Brandon Aiyuk. I don't think it's going to happen, but anything is possible. Bam. There's your report. I don't understand this part of it. I really don't. What part of this is concrete? And that anything is possible part is just basic CYA. It is basic CYA. That is all cover your ass. Then none of that is anything concrete, solid, evidence, anything. You can say anything and at the end of it say anything is possible, and that's how you cover your ass. You know what, Rob? Breaking news from Ian Rappaport, new video. Go, cut to it. Anything is possible. Anything's possible. Rihanna might respond to my DM. Anything's possible. Ugh.
Is that possible though?
It's not possible, but anything's possible. Rob, load it
Rob,
up.
you there?
What is going on here? I'm sorry. This is horrible potty.
But it is, I would say this pretty confidently. Whatever the 49ers will pay Brandon Aiyuk, who they really, really like as a player who they developed all the way through, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a team that's willing to pay him more. That's actually not really the question. The question really is, does Brandon Aiyuk want to stay in San Francisco with a team that's awesome and will probably be very good for a long time? Are they going to pay him the most in the NFL? Maybe not. They got a good team. They want to keep it together. But would it be enough to keep him? I'm kind of with you. I'm leaning more as of right now of him potentially staying, but this story has not yet been written fully at all.
We still gotta wait till the draft happens. Like, I mean, we already knew that, like once Thursday, once Friday is done, like I think this goes away, like it did with Debo as well. But again, anything can happen. It's not going away yet. Soon.
This is maddening. It really is. There's nothing that's being said. Nothing. Not a word. Nothing at all is being said. Unless you're hearing things that you want to hear, unless you're cutting through things that aren't being said, there is nothing being said by anyone that nobody didn't already know. Brandon Aiyuk might be traded. Brandon Aiyuk might be a 49er. Bam. But anything's possible. Oh my God, this is maddening, man. Like it's the people that are going to cut through all this stuff. The people that are going to listen to all this stuff and say, well, this was said, that was said. It's if you want to believe something, the words are there to help you paint whatever narrative you want. The words are there, but you're not learning anything from anything that's being said right now. Again, it's 2 days before the draft. Everything that we knew about this situation still has remained the same going into Thursday. Either Brandon Aiyuk's going to be here or he's not.
I do want to sorry. No, go ahead, finish.
No, you're
Jay.
good. No, you're good. You're good.
I just do want to add, though, that one of the things like Ian just questioned in that video
is whether he wants to be here.
Exactly. And I think we do know the answer to that. And Mike Silver also said it in his article from this morning that he does want to stay here. The 49ers do actually want to keep him. And we also have Brandon Aiyuk's wide receiver coach openly saying that he's talked to Brandon Aiyuk and he doesn't want to leave San Francisco. He just wants to get paid. So it's as simple as that. I mean, usually when you have two sides that want to make it work, you can make something work. So again, I still am, if I had a bet, I think Brandon Aiyuk stays Now I know anything can happen, but I still think the trade is I don't think he's saying it just to piss off Jay. I still think it's less likely. Let me ask you this, Jay. At this point, it's Tuesday, April 23rd. We're a couple of days from the draft. At this point, 2 years ago, how are you feeling about Debo Samuel? Like, were you not feeling like the Debo Samuel trade was a lot more likely then than Brandon Aiyuk trade is right now?
I wasn't. I wasn't. I remember being in Vegas for that draft, and everyone that I spoke to that was around that I respect, either former coaches or guys in the media, they were saying that this thing was going to go up to like the last minute, but the 49ers weren't going to budge off of anything that wasn't like like I know it was rumored the Jets were going to offer pick number 9, whatever it was.
It was
Sounds like
10.
that's not something that really happened. So it felt the same way. Like I never really had a sense that the 49ers were going to trade Debo Samuel. I never had a sense of that because I never thought someone would offer the type of compensation they were looking for. And what you said is so true. The 49ers value their players differently. Just because nobody else would imagine themselves giving up a first rounder or whatever doesn't mean the 49ers are just going to say, "Well, we're budging off of our first round, haul that we're looking to get just because you won't give it." No, they're just going to move at their pace, and that's the thing is if you're not giving it, we're not just going to settle. So I never really had a sense of that. I never did, and I thought coming off of the year that he had, literally having a team in his backpack, thinking that he could do it again, right? And they were going to run it back, or they were going to have Trey Lance the next year. I never really thought that was going to happen. I'll tell you this. I'll say this. I have less concern about Brandon Aiyuk than I did Debo Samuel, and I wasn't even really that
Okay.
concerned with Debo.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And so like I am on that exact same boat as well, and so that's why I'm not phased by any of this that's coming out, and this is gonna be an annoying like couple of days in the lead up to the draft. It's gonna be an annoying Thursday, maybe even Friday for some people who will consider a second round pick being on the table for
No.
Brandon Ayuk. But yeah, I don't see that happening one bit. Again, I don't care what other teams or execs, want to say about that. I think we know the 49ers well enough. Now, to kind of pivot towards like what John Lynch was saying about the draft as a whole, one thing he kind of mentioned is, they put draft grades on all these players. Some of those guys ended up going back to college. That's going to be kind of the new norm with the nil and all of that. And so, now the later rounds in the draft might be lacking. And John Lynch did acknowledge that as well. And so also acknowledged that 10 picks probably not going to make the roster, then they don't have a lot of needs like that. So does that kind of make things interesting for you in the earlier rounds of this draft for the 49ers to make some moves and be aggressive for some of those guys in the earlier rounds?
100%. And I just wrote an article. I'm not sure if it's out. It's going to be a survey on Niners Nation. Uh, the 49ers have 10 picks. All 10 aren't going to make this roster. Absolutely. Those compensatory picks, move them and move up and go get a guy.
Mhm.
The way that I would frame this is obviously, yes, I believe that they can be aggressive, and that doesn't necessarily mean the first round either. So I don't want people to freak
Right.
out if they don't trade up in the first round, okay? Because they can trade up in the second round and really go get a guy too. Those first 100 picks are extremely valuable, provided you don't use one on a kicker. Now, the thing that I have to say is this is regarded as one of the deepest tackle drafts in a long time, right? And I don't want 49er fans to go crazy if they don't select a tackle in the first round. Let me explain. You can't in one breath tell me that this is the deepest tackle class and tell me that you can't go best player available or get a dude in the first round, somebody maybe like a corner, maybe a dominant edge, right? Somebody that's going to be there. You have to see how this actually plays out. And then say, well, they can't get a tackle in the second round. It's really crazy to me that people just say you've got to automatically jam pick 31 as an offensive lineman. Now, the reason that I push back on this is because that's drafting for need. And drafting for need is way worse than best player available, right? Now, here's the thing. Everyone assumes that if you take a tackle or if you take an offensive lineman at pick 31, that he's good. He's good. He's already good. But what happens when you take that tackle or lineman and he's not good and you could have had a better player? This is such an imperfect science that when people say, I want to see a first round offensive lineman, but when that offensive lineman doesn't hit, you are going to lose your mind. It's an imperfect science, the draft part. So automatically saying 31 has to be a lineman, no questions asked. That's when you get yourself in trouble. That's when you find yourself drafting for need as opposed to best player available, and you're not playing the board. That's the part that scares me the most when it comes to the outrage that may come from pick 31. Because if it is a lineman, many fans will rejoice. But if that lineman doesn't pan out, oh my God, they're going to rip him apart. But you got to have a lineman at 31. I don't understand the strategy. It doesn't really make too much sense to me, Steph.
Yeah, it doesn't to me either. I've actually been pleasantly surprised that I feel like the majority of fans are coming around to the idea of, pick 31 or that first round pick, not being an offensive lineman, right? Like I've seen people getting excited about the possibility of a wide receiver. I've seen people getting excited about some of the corners that could be available there as well. And so, yeah, I think that's the most likely case for the 49ers, that they do go best player available. And, honestly, I think their options are completely open as well as to moving in the first round, whether they want to trade back, whether they want to move up for one of those 22 first round grades that they have. If any of those guys happen to fall in their vicinity of 25 and back, and they feel like they need to move up just a couple spots for one of those guys to guarantee they could get one of those first round grade guys, I think they do it, and also another thing John Lynch mentioned, they have, I believe, like 16 gold helmet guys as
Gold
well.
helmet.
And those aren't necessarily like all first round guys. Those could happen later in the draft. So I think the 49ers, have the potential to also get some sleeper picks. Some of the offensive linemen that they've been meeting with to this point have been kind of in the later rounds anyway. So I'm kind of thinking like second round, definitely day two. Day two is a sweet spot, I think, for the 49ers to target an offensive lineman. Actually just saw or heard earlier today, Matt Mayoko on 49ers Talk did mention that one of the visits was Layden Robinson out of Texas A&M. He's a guard. Let me ask you this, Jay. Do you get the sense that maybe guard is a bigger need for the 49ers, or that the 49ers think that guard would be a bigger need than tackle? Because everyone's like transfixed on, we got to improve right tackle, Cole McKibbin.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly how I hear it too as well.
yeah, exactly. And I get the sense that the 49ers are less sold on the right guard spot in Spencer Burford than, Colton McKivitz.
Well, I think right guard can stay a little bit longer because we saw the way that Feliciano played. And I don't think Burford's going to start over Feliciano. I think bringing him back right away. Yeah, I think bringing him back right away means Feliciano starts there.
There's
But I
just
did
a
want to
one-year
point out.
deal.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about this year. And then you can address guard again. Like Feliciano makes it through the year. You still have somebody who can play behind Burford in a pinch. But you know what's funny about this tackle group is so many of them, like Jordan Morgan and all these other guys, they're like, oh, he's a guard. Like he's going to wind up moving inside the guard, right? So it's a little bit funny how this whole class has kind of been talked about. Like there's your surefire tackles, your surefire studs, and then the other guys, well, Jordan Morgan's got short arms. He's going to have to move to guard. This guy's got to move to guard. This guy's got to move to center. I think with the way that the 49ers usually get guys, not only just like in every position that can play all positions, they tend to do this all the time with offensive linemen. Like an offensive lineman that can play tackle, center, guard, all of them. What is it? Master of all trades. What is it? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yes.
Kind of. So I think honestly, right tackle is a little bit more of the need because they can keep McKivitz as a guy that can like be thrown in there at a pinch, like at guard if possible, things like that. But I do think Feliciano coming back means that they're going to run it back with him at least right there at right guard right away, and then they can address it one more time after that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that it's not a huge need this season, but Lynch also said like they're not really drafting for immediate needs, but they're looking at needs 1 year, 2 years from
Hate that.
now.
Hate that.
Why?
Because that's why we are where we are right now with this draft being so
No,
important.
You know what I think? What I think they were dart throwing these past few years just because they feel like they could because they were already deep everywhere else. So they were dart throwing, going with like what they thought were high upside guys who could develop because they really didn't have space for a lot of these picks.
That's true.
And so I think they were just kind of, shooting by the hip a little bit with some of these guys. And now they're at a point where they can't do that anymore. But it's interesting because this year they are still deep, but also we look at next year and it's like, whoa, they're going to have a lot of holes next year, but they got to start drafting for those holes clearly. And so that's what makes this draft really interesting because are they going to what did I say? Did I say something that was
No.
a
It's a comment.
moment?
It's
Oh,
a
okay.
comment we see. It's a no. Trust me. I would have just if you would have said it, I would have said it.
I know it says something with holes. I was just like, oh no.
Oh, that is there it is. There it is. JKBG says someone lost a bet, and that's my theory on why they drafted Latu. That if the 49ers are playing around like that
Now
in
it
the draft
pisses me
room,
off.
oh yeah, of course it does. And that all right, so look, I understand the theory
Lost a
of
bet.
hey, we're loaded, we're not gonna have a bunch of these guys. But taking chances on guys that either are too high up on the board, Cameron Latu, others, guys that are injured, all that stuff. This is why you're in the position you are, and this is why this is so critical now. What the 49ers had done before was you had Hufanga, you had Tart. As soon as Tart leaves, Hufanga goes in, right? Like you had guys that were ready to step into roles right away. And obviously the same thing with Banks. Banks becomes left guard. Like there's a way to plan for the future without completely like farting away these picks. That's a horrible term. Like, I think, that's not even good podcasting right there. But like, that's why you're in this position now, in which you need, and I said this to Rob, and obviously this is me shooting for the moon, landing on the stars. You need like 4 impact guys in this draft. I know that's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. No, it's hard. 2, I'll take. 3, I'll take. 4 is obviously me just being like overly optimistic and hyperbolic, I guess. But the whole like, this is why we are where we are. Robert Beal's going to be the guy next year. Well, Kalia Davis is going to be there. And like, it's none of these guys are impact guys right now. They're rotational guys. They're guys that just aren't like you. And I understand again. And I talked about this with Rob last week. First round rate is less than 50%, right? But when you have no first rounders and you're starting in the third all the time, it's much harder for you to find those impact guys. I think last year, what you walk away with is you walk away with Tig and you walk away with the kicker. There you go. You got 2 starters right there. Everybody else, Ronnie Bell's a special teamer. D. Winters, Jalen Graham, Latu, Willis, like Robert Beal, Darrell Luter, like what are any of these guys? What can they be? And now you have these 10 picks. Now you have a chance to really right some of the wrongs from these last 2 drafts because we've gone through the list and everything. But that whole like plan for the future thing, for some reason, it worked early on and it hasn't worked well lately because Drake Jackson was supposed to be the guy. Oh, Danny Gray, nothing. Spencer Burford was a starter. We just don't know what any of these guys are. If not, look at this draft class in 2022, and I hate to keep rehashing it. If not for Brock Purdy,
Yeah, it's gross.
what is that draft class?
Gross.
What is that draft class? Tariq Castlefield isn't even on his roster.
That is, if we're just looking at that draft alone without the context of everything else that this regime has accomplished, that is you're fired draft.
That's a you're fired. Whiff, and then you're starting quarterback.
Nasty work.
Insane. Nasty work. Nasty work. But yeah, the whole like, well, he needs a year to develop. In a year, when he develops, he'll be no. Like honestly, right now, there is no surefire like impact guys, and I want to make sure I make that clear because everybody's like, hey, make sure you get a guy that's there day one. Okay, well, if you know that, then give me the lottery numbers, right? Like that's how hard this is. It's not as simple as all that. But still, like this whole idea of like another year, next year, this guy, it's kicked the can down the road so far that that's where we are right now.
Are the 49ers not good at developing guys? Like, is that a question worth asking at this point?
I don't know. All right, so
I'll say
if you,
this. I'll say this. It's hard to
uh
develop guys when they don't get a chance to play. And a lot of these guys haven't had a chance to play. And I mean, in camp, they're kind of obviously overshadowed by the counterparts ahead of them because the 49ers are top heavy. So they don't ever get a chance to really, cut their teeth and develop into what the 49ers hoped they would be. So I think that's part of the problem. And also I think like when you're so deep on the depth chart, I mean, I don't want to say you get ignored, but you're not getting as close the amount of tension as you should, to be able to develop. So I think that's part of it as well.
it just it's tough because some of it is some of it can be blamed on development, some of it can be blamed on the player. Um,
Yeah.
can't develop Kalia Davis if he never plays. Can't develop Samuel Womack because I just don't think like he's probably not that good. Um, Drake Jackson, that one felt like something that they needed to address and they've been looking for since D Ford left, like a running mate for Nick Bosa. And he just hasn't developed. He's not strong off blocks. He runs into sacks. He's not really creating pressure. And obviously the injuries are now like piling up and we're in year 3 now. Um, it might be a little bit of both, but Danny Gray's just a speedster. His route tree, we knew that wasn't going to be something that was developed. We all just assumed that was going to be him and Trey Lance, just him having someone to throw the football to and possibly being a field stretcher. But it might be a little bit of both. I think where the question I'll ask you is this: Chris Kosuri gets a ton of love because of like Arden Key, Omenihu, right? Like all these guys. Ebukam became like more of a run stopper when he was here, but these are guys that kind of got a bag off of that, right? And I think it's
Mhm.
widely assumed that when the 49ers take defensive linemen, that they are raw and they need to be developed. It's under Kosurik's watch. And then either they're injured, Beal was injured, right? Like Drake Jackson hasn't taken a step. But I think, like, again, like, obviously we don't believe that Chop Robinson is going to be there at 31. But the idea is, well, let Chop get under Chris Kosurik. That is something that's kind of been a thought process that I think is, I don't want to say failing. I'm not going to say that, but it is something that I think he gets a ton of credit for because he's done a great job with certain guys. But those guys have already been in the NFL. And I
Yes.
even think that Cleveland Farrell gets a little bit of like, we overlook him as well too. I think he was really good when he was there, especially as a edge setter and against the run. But the idea of like, hey, you got to take one of these raw defensive linemen and just put him on the Chris Kosurik. Do you? Is that really something that like we want to do? And again, nothing is set in stone. There's no pass rusher that you're just like, hey, he's gonna get right in there. Maybe like a Dallas Turner, maybe what's the other guy's name? Verge, right? Like those guys, like maybe, but it's the Chris Kosurik thing is an interesting conversation in my opinion because I think he does get a lot of credit because he has done some good work and you've seen him get more out of guys that have been in the league. But the assumption that you take someone who's raw right away and give him to Chris Kosurik and just let the magic happen, I don't know if I'm like completely on board with that, even though there is evidence to the contrary with NFL stars.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to see more. And one of the comments that, Rob briefly put up here from David, problem is they need to play and Kyle has trust issues with rookies. Um I do think that there is a trust issue with rookies with Kyle Shanahan and this coaching staff. I think it's more so rooted in now this team has something to lose. Whereas like when Kyle Shanahan first started, I mean, they were building everything from the ground up. So a lot of these guys came in and right away they were getting snaps. Like Deebo Samuel couldn't really afford to be in the doghouse. Like, yes, like he has talked about how, there was some tough love involved in his rookie season, but he still played, right? Because they didn't really have anyone else. And they were building. So now, again, they're not getting that playing time. And so now you have more to lose. You've been in this window, right? So you don't have that time to develop guys. It really reminds me of the Warriors Like the Warriors would draft a bunch of guys who had potential, and you got Steph Curry, so you're good. You got Clay,
Wiseman.
and you got all these guys who you don't necessarily need to build anything. You just need complementary pieces to the core that you have. But those guys never got opportunities. And like they were bringing in a bunch of vets and things like that because they were in this like championship window, and they couldn't afford to risk of seeing what these young players could do. They couldn't afford to have these guys making mistakes in the midst of that, right? So I to me it's the same thing with the 49ers these last couple years, and that's been to the result of some of these whiffs, I think. I mean, I can't believe that all of these picks were just bad players. Like I think to some extent it's probably a mixture of some bad players and
Yeah.
some lack of like development in house after
It's
they
a bit of
were
both. Two things can be
drafted.
true. Two
Yeah,
things
yeah.
can be true.
Yeah. And as Mr. J says, at least the Warriors actually won something. The
Too soon.
49ers have come really the 49ers come real close. But they got nothing to show for it, which makes me worry that, they might continue on this path. I really hope they don't, but
Mhm.
they do have something to lose. So, but these rookies need to play.
All right, let's get to the super chat from 49ers Throwback. Thank you for the donation. Brock Purdy looks like he's jacked. Let's go. He's going to get better. Did y'all watch the video of him and Caleb working out? Yeah, Caleb wants to work with the best quarterback in football. It makes sense. I mean, honestly, if I want to learn from anybody, I want to learn from Brock Purdy. And obviously, people are gonna, obviously take that as fact and not sarcasm. But yeah, I did see it. Is actually his arms look a little bit bigger, man. This is the exciting part about this
Quads.
offseason. There is a full offseason with all the phases of Brock Purdy not having to do any injuries, not have to deal with anything. Man looks jacked, man. And he looks like he's in great shape. And now he gets to continue to work through all the phases. That's something that's very encouraging. There is a chance very much that Brock Purdy will improve this year with a full offseason, building more rapport and also getting his feet under him for his second full season.
Yeah, I saw that clip, and honestly, the headline was, Brock Purdy working out with Caleb Williams, right? But I honestly thought that part was the least interesting part of the video, because if you watch the video, it's them talking about how they're looking at the biomechanics of their movements and all that, and just the intricacies of what they're improving in the off season. Like I found that stuff really interesting, and yes, it definitely underlines that this is Brock Purdy's first chance to really be able to do that. He didn't get that chance last year. He was rehabbing. So, yeah, I mean, I think this offseason is huge for Brock. I really can't wait to see, what he does this season. This is interesting, and I want to ask you. Maybe this is one of the last questions that I ask you. I'm asking a lot of questions to you
Hey,
today.
ask away, Steph. I love it.
Because I was listening to 49ers talk this morning, and they were talking about, Brock Purdy could be better, but he can't imagine him being better statistically, because
It's
last
hard to
season
be
he had a
it's hard to be
hell of a
more efficient.
season.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how do you kind of see Brock Purdy being better this year, and do you feel like it's possible that he could be better statistically?
Statistically, honestly, when you think about it, if he gets more passing attempts, then that obviously has a chance to decrease your efficiency. It does. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. But the amount of numbers that he was able to put up with those low passing attempts makes you think that there's a chance for his yards to go up if there are more passing attempts. And I think the way that you can see improvement is the one thing that everybody knocks him for, right? And it's not a made up stat, but it's a nerd stat, and it's turnover worthy plays, right? That percentage. Now, if you
Mm.
see that number decrease because he's more in command, he's not forcing the ball into positions that, at times are scary, which doesn't happen often. But that's the only way that I can see it. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat 9.6 yards per attempt, 9.9 air yards per attempt, 7% touchdown rate. All three led the league. Yards after the catch, 13.9. Passer rating, 113. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard to break those numbers. I think and to quote the great Rich Madrid, the actual improvement will not be seen in the box score. It will be seen with the eyes, Chico, and the eyes never lie. So I think that's really
a
where
bar.
you're going to see the improvement.
That's a bar, Jay. But no, I guess I'm like preemptively preparing myself for the season discourse of people comparing Brock Purdy's 2023 stats to 2024 and being like, he hasn't improved, but I wholeheartedly agree with the way you just said that. I think he is going to improve in ways that we aren't going to see on the stat sheet. And I'm okay with that. I mean, and also if it translates to wins for the team, of course, I'll be okay with that as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the season for Brock. I think he's excited too. He spoke yesterday as well after John Lynch, and it just seems like he's pumped and ready to go and has an optimistic attitude on everything. So excited.
One other Brock Purdy note, and this wouldn't be a 49ers podcast if we didn't discuss the 49ers quarterback. Brock Purdy confirmed big Toyota guy. Big Toyota guy. Okay? Big Toyota guy.
He's
Toyota
got his
athlete.
bag.
Toyota
Yes,
athlete. Love that for him. Probably
Toyota.
got more money. Probably got more money for that sponsorship than his entire contract this year. Love that for him.
So why he's able to move out.
Finally, he doesn't have a roommate anymore. Doesn't have to put the sock on his door, nothing like that. All right. I think we're done here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to this video. Make sure you guys use the bully. Oh my goodness. Gold Standard Podcast Network, wherever you get all your audio podcasts. Follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Follow me on Twitter, Jason Aponte 2103. I am headed to the draft tomorrow. I will be in the media workroom all 3 days. So the content will be flowing from there. Shout out to Detroit. If you know any good places to go in Detroit, let me know. And make sure you guys head to goldstandardniners.com for, some articles by Rob, man. This guy's working nonstop, man, as well, too. So, and remember, Brandon Aiyuk might be on the team. Brandon Aiyuk might sign an extension. And also, anything is possible. That's classic cover your ass. And on that note, for Jay and for Steph.
Peace.